The 9.3.0 PTB is officially live. In my last video discussing the dev stream, I was worried, but I wanted to wait for the numbers. Well, the numbers are here, and they're not great. Behavior isn't just tweaking a few things, they're attempting to fundamentally change the way we play Dead by Daylight, yet again. They're taking another massive swing at tunneling and slugging, completely overhauling survivor defenses and giving killers a so-called compensation that has a lot of people scratching their heads. No matter how you feel about these changes, ready or not, something to address tunneling and slugging is coming. Behavior has made that painfully clear. So I'm going to break down every major change and give you my honest, unfiltered opinion on whether this patch is about to save the game or push it into an even worse place. The patch notes for 9.3.0 are massive, and they touch on some of the biggest pain points of the entire Survivor community. We're talking about brand new, base kit systems designed to curb the game's most frustrating strategies. Well, not completely brand new, as this is Behavior's second attempt in a row to address this. Will they continue to ignore feedback? We'll see. We'll go through this piece by piece, starting with the heaviest hitters, the new anti-tunneling and anti-slugging mechanics. Then we'll cover the killer updates, the perk and item reworks, and I'll wrap it up with my final verdict. Keep in mind, these are my initial reactions, and my thoughts on these changes could definitely evolve with more time in the PTB. I've broken this video down into sections, so feel free to use the chapters to jump into the changes that matter the most to you. And hey, if you enjoy these discussions and want to stay up to date on all things Dead by Daylight, consider subscribing. It really helps the channel more than you know. And before we dive into the patch notes, I want to give a massive thank you to my channel members. I want to make it clear that 100% of all membership income is donated directly to the local animal shelters that I work with. Thanks to your incredible generosity, I was just able to make our first official channel donation, spending a staggering $200 to sponsor 4 older special needs cats for adoption. Sponsoring means we've paid their adoption fees, which will hopefully make it a lot easier for them to find their forever homes. Admittedly, I spent a good bit over what I actually received from my members, but it's thanks to YouTube that I was able to do that. So thank you so much to my amazing channel members for helping me make this happen. I want to give a special shout out to my tier 1 kilobytes, Polo, Jay Reynolds, Peter RJ, Evil Cherub, Bloodshot, and Alex Crow. And a huge welcome to our new kilobytes, the Lovable Kazi, and Suerte Dorada. And of course, a huge thank you to my tier 2 megabytes, Kelneck, In Cairo, Winnison, Foxrocks, ZSD, Crazy Creeper, Mirror Steer, Eden, and Mike C. If you want to be added to this list of amazing donors and help animals in need, consider joining the channel today. Now, let's get into the changes. This is the absolute heart of the 9.3.0 PTB, and the changes most people are talking about. Behavior is introducing 2 huge new systems aimed at combating tunneling and slugging, but the way they've been implemented is raising some serious questions. First, let's look at the anti-tunneling changes, called Unhook Protections. After being unhooked, you get a whole suite of buffs for a full 30 seconds. This includes 10% haste, the endurance status effect, and the new elusive status that hides your scratch marks, pools of blood, and grunts of pain. The unhook protections also mutes power-specific noises, like puking with the plague. On top of that, for the first 10 seconds, you can see the killer's aura if they're within 32 meters. This is the white aura, so it cuts through undetectable, meaning Wraith, Pig, and Ghostface will be revealed by this aura, even if they're hidden. These effects go away if you perform a conspicuous action, but they stick around for 3 seconds after you're fully healed. In my opinion, 30 seconds of endurance is just way too much. It feels like it's just asking for survivors to get aggressive and use these buffs to body block for the unhooker, resulting in potentially more tunneling. A 10-second aura read is also pretty wild since, like I said, it seems to cut through undetectable, especially when a coordinated team can turn it into a 10-second wall hack for everyone. I get that balancing around Swift is tough, but you can't just pretend it doesn't exist. It's also worth mentioning they justified these buffs by claiming players are getting tunneled 40% of the time, a statistic so high it makes me seriously question the data they're using for these decisions. Personally, I think they should have started smaller, maybe keeping the haste and endurance at 10 seconds with the other changes to see how that impacted things first. So what's the killer compensation? It's another shot at the unique hook bonus, but it's basically nothing, spoiler alert. If you hook a survivor who is different from the last person you hooked, you gain tier 1 bloodlust for 15 seconds. But this bonus is immediately lost if you enter a chase. It's also disabled completely once the exit gates are powered. Honestly, calling this compensation feels like a joke. Bloodlust is so much weaker than haste, especially considering it doesn't stack with killer powers and it disappears if you do almost anything besides walk forwards. The truly baffling part is they made it reset when you start a chase, the one time you'd actually need it. Next up is the anti-slugging update. When you're downed, a resolve bar starts filling, which takes 120 seconds. This progress never resets when you're picked up. Once the bar is full, you can pick yourself up from the dying state for the rest of the trial. The bar fills 33% faster for each additional survivor in the dying state, and your crawl speed increases the longer you're on the ground. This is an improvement from the last PTB, even though that's not saying much, but the detail that ruins this change for me is that the resolve bar never regresses or resets. With how tough playing killer can be right now, introducing this without any real trade-offs feels like a poor decision. There are many times that you simply can't pick a survivor up because they're under a pallet or they have a friend nearby with a flashlight or a stun grenade. Especially with the increased pallet density, meaning there are pallets every 10 feet, a survivor can just crawl underneath a pallet and then be relatively safe. While the bar speed bonus per downed survivor does target aggressive slugging, which is a relatively good thing, the fact that the bar never regresses is the fundamental issue here. Similar to the last PTB, this makes it so that getting off a generator to go for the pickup is rarely the correct play. I'd argue 95% of the time it's going to be better just to stick to the generator and leave your teammate on the ground so they can get what is essentially a free 5th perk. Next, there are a couple more major changes related to hooks. First, the other survivors will now be able to see the hooked survivor's resolve bar on their HUD. Now, I've seen some people calling this base kit kindred, but I feel like that's a pessimistic view, and I try to stay balanced on this channel. To me, this just seems like a solid quality of life change, unlike dumping 200 pallets on every map. It helps close the massive information gap between Swift and solo queue players, which feels fair all around. However, they're also changing the anti-facecamp mechanic. The meter will now fill faster the longer a killer stays near the hook, ramping up to ×4 speed after 20 seconds. To balance this, the base fill rate was halved, but the Facecamp range, and I say that in giant quotations, was increased to 20 meters. I have many opinions on these changes, with a big one being that 20 meters is by no means Facecamping. But I'll save you some time and I'll just say that this entire section is unnecessary. The current anti-camp mechanic seems to work just fine. I hardly ever see true face camping in my games anymore. It makes me wonder why they're revisiting this at all, unless their internal data is showing something completely different from what players are experiencing, which I wouldn't be surprised on given how perplexing their data is and how biased their surveys seem to be. By the way, if you're getting some value out of this breakdown, consider hitting that like button or hyping if you're on mobile. It's a huge help to getting the video out to more people in the community, and I'd really appreciate the support. Let's move on to killers and perks, starting with a few quick killer adjustments. The Shape Slaughtering Strike now has standard camera controls, a nice little quality of life buff to help him use his power more effectively at loops, especially with the number of pallets in most maps now. In a much stranger move, the Cenobite received an unexpected nerf. His possessed chains can no longer restrain a survivor who has endurance. I don't think anyone was expecting Pinhead to catch nerfs, as he isn't a particularly strong or popular killer, but hey, behavior's confusing. One major killer headline is the Skull Merchant. Her drones are getting buffed across the board. Faster rotation, a stronger hindrance, and a shorter deployment cooldown. Survivors also can't just fast vault to become immune to scans anymore. The trade-off is that survivors now have to stand under a drone for 2.5 seconds to get a lock-on stack, rather than it being instant. Personally, I don't play enough Skull Merchant to say if these changes will be the fix she needs, but I will say this, it looks like behavior's data is finally catching up to what players have known for a long time. She's an overwhelmingly weak killer, whose stats were inflated because frustrated players would just give up and move on. It's something the community has been saying for ages, but it's good to see the numbers are finally reflecting that reality. If they would actually play their game, they might have seen this sooner, but late is better than never, I suppose. Only one killer perk got a major change, and this is a sad one for me, Furtive Chase. Let's be clear, this is undeniably a nerf. Each time you hook your obsession, you gain a token that decreases your terror radius, and the rescuer becomes the new obsession. The developers said in their notes they were worried about the old haste effect stacking with the new unique hook bloodlust bonus, which is barely anything to begin with. So, in Behavior's infinite wisdom, instead of just reducing the haste they were so worried about, they changed the perk so you won't get its value until most of the match is already over, if you get that value at all. Furtive Chase was a fun perk that rewarded not tunneling. Now it's probably dead and buried outside of a few very niche meme builds. Now for the survivor side. Normally when the developers change perks, their strategy is to take something away and add something else, to more or less keep things balanced. With the majority of these changes, however, what was taken away was made base kit by the new tunneling and slugging mechanics, resulting in what are essentially net buffs. For example, Babysitter now lets you see both the killer's and the unhooker's aura for up to 30 seconds, because its main effect was made base kit. Breakdown increases your healing speed by 100% for up to 90 seconds after being unhooked, because the aura from Breakdown was made base kit. And the new Borrowed Time gives the person you unhook the ability to fully recover from the dying state for 100 seconds, because Borrowed Time's extended unhook protections was made base kit. Giving survivors a 30-second killer aura read with Babysitter just for doing an unhook feels absolutely insane, especially when you think about how a coordinated team will use that information. Babysitter just became pretty damn strong because no matter who the killer goes for, if it's one of you two involved in the unhooking process, the killer basically can't catch you for quite a while. The breakdown healing speed buff also feels excessive, given how fast healing already is. If you combine it with a perk like Resurgence, you're essentially always coming off the hook fully healed. I like the concept behind the new Borrowed Time, though it's still a technical buff as Borrowed Time's effects were made base kit. Yet again, funny enough. I think the changes to Wicked and Off the Record are interesting. Off the Record in particular is really strong. 80 seconds of stealth that isn't disabled by conspicuous actions is a huge benefit, and I think the initial panic over losing the endurance was a bit of an overreaction. Wicked's buff is pretty insane in very specific circumstances, but those aren't likely to come about in anything but bully squads. If you combine Wicked with Resurgence, you come off the hook with anti-tunneling protections and completely healed. Hey, Editing Kovo here. So I've played a little bit in the PTB and I have changed my opinion on this since writing the script. Wicked is insane right now. It is so popular. The basement spawns in the main building or the shack, both of which are normally extremely strong areas. If people loop you intentionally in those areas and you put them on the basement, then you waste a ton of time. They come off fully healed and they have their off the hook protections. It just feels really bad to play against. Finally, we have two very unexpected and interesting changes to medkit add-ons. The anti-hemorrhagic syringe, the syringe no longer gives a heal over time. Instead, it's consumed on use to instantly remove the exhaustion status effect. The styptic agent no longer provides endurance. It now increases self-healing efficiency by 15% and is no longer consumed on use. I see the syringe change as both a nerf and a buff, depending on how you used it. For players who use the syringe for passive efficiency to get a second free passive heal out of their medkits, this is a clear nerf. However, it's a pretty big buff for survivors who use it aggressively to extend chases. Using the old syringe mid-chase was always a risky play, but now trading your medkit to instantly get a second lithe or sprint burst guarantees its value. It's interesting that they've decided to finally take a look at these pretty busted add-ons, but I'll need to wait and see how it impacts my matches. So what's my final verdict on the 9.3.0 PTB? Honestly, this feels like a patch with great ideas, but deeply worrying execution. And let me be clear, I'm not opposed to them addressing slugging and tunneling. I think unfun mechanics should be removed. However, the game needs to stay balanced, and addressing these mechanics without addressing why killers feel the need to use them in the first place will only make things worse. It's no secret that the game is pretty miserable for both sides right now. Though I'd personally argue that it's more miserable for killers, as after recent changes my survivor escape rate shot up without any measurable increases in my skill. Just fixing the misery for one side and not the other just drives the behavior is survivor-sided idea further into everyone's mind. And that's to say nothing of how biased they seemed on their dev stream, but I've already covered that pretty extensively in my other video. The new unhook protections are so powerful they'll almost certainly be used for aggression, while the killer compensation feels insulting. The anti-slugging system is built on the flawed premise that the meter never regresses, punishing killers for just playing the game normally. These changes will completely alter the flow of the match, and I'm worried they're going to make the killer experience even more miserable. While there are some awesome quality of life updates in here, like the scratch marks and the Myers buff, they're overshadowed by core gameplay changes that feel unbalanced from the start. This PTB is a massive step, but I'm just not convinced it's a step in the right direction for the overall health of Dead by Daylight. Now I want to hear from you all. What's the one change in this PTB that you're most excited or worried about? Is the new unhook protection system too strong? Is the killer compensation a joke? Let me know all your thoughts down in the comments. As always, thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the fog.